When my own children convinced me I was losing my mind just to get their hands on my money, my first reaction wasn't anger. It was relief. Relief that I finally understood why my coffee tasted bitter every morning, why my checkbook never balanced anymore, why I kept finding pills I didn't recognize in my bathroom cabinet. Relief because it meant I wasn't actually going crazy. They were making me crazy. And that difference, well, that difference changed everything. My name is Dorothy Henderson, though most folks have called me Dot since I was knee-high to a grasshopper. I'm 68 years old now, and I'm sitting in my only living room in Springfield, Missouri, in the house I've lived in for 43 years, the house my children tried to take from me, the house they almost succeeded in taking. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me back up and tell you how a mother's love became her biggest weakness and how that weakness nearly destroyed her. I want to tell you this story because I know I'm not alone. I know there are women out there, maybe watching this right now, who feel something isn't quite right in their own families, who feel like they're walking on eggshells in their own homes, who wonder if maybe they really are losing it, just like their kids keep saying. This story isn't easy for me to share, but if it helps even one person recognize what's happening to them before it's too late, then every painful memory I'm about to relive will be worth it. You're about to hear something that still makes my hands shake when I think about it. You're about to learn how the two people I loved most in this world plotted against me with the cold calculation of strangers planning a heist. And you're going to find out exactly how I discovered the truth, how I fought back, and how I made sure they never saw a penny of what they tried so hard to steal. But here's what I need you to understand right from the start. This isn't just a story about betrayal. It's a story about survival. It's about finding strength you didn't know you had when you're pushed into a corner. It's about learning that sometimes the people who are supposed to protect you are the very ones you need protection from. And most importantly, it's a story about how it's never, ever too late to stand up for yourself, even when you're standing completely alone. If you value stories like mine, real accounts from real women who've lived through the unthinkable and came out stronger, I need just 2 seconds of your time right now. Hit that like button, because that tiny click tells YouTube to share this story with women who need to hear it. This content is free, always will be, but your support through a simple like helps us reach more people who might be going through exactly what I went through. That's all I ask. Just show YouTube this story matters, because these real-life accounts of resilience and justice need to be heard. Thank you, truly, for being here and for helping spread these important stories. Now, let me take you back to where this all really started, long before I had any idea what my children were capable of. I grew up in a tiny town outside of Joplin, Missouri, the youngest of 5 kids in a family that didn't have much except each other. My father worked at the zinc mine until it played out, then did odd jobs wherever he could find them. My mother took in laundry and mending, her fingers always moving, always working, even while we ate dinner or watched the one television we shared with the neighbors. We lived in a 2-bedroom house that should have held maybe 3 people comfortably, but somehow we made it work with 7. Money was so tight that I wore my sister's hand-me-downs until they literally fell apart. And even then, Mama would patch them one more time before finally using the fabric for quilting. We ate beans and cornbread more nights than I can count, and meat was something we saw mainly on Sundays, if we were lucky. But you know what? I never felt poor. I felt loved. I felt safe. I knew that every person under that creaky roof would defend me to their dying breath, and that knowledge was worth more than all the new dresses and fancy dinners in the world. I learned early that family was everything, that blood meant loyalty, that you protected your own no matter what. My parents drilled that into us from the time we could understand words. Family first, Daddy would say, tapping his chest right over his heart. Always family first. The world out there don't care about you, but your family does. Your family will never let you down. I carried those words with me my entire life, carved them into my heart like they were scripture. I built my whole world on that foundation. And that foundation, God help me, was exactly what my children used against me. I met Robert Henderson when I was 19 years old, working as a waitress at the Route 66 diner in Springfield. I'd moved there after high school, desperate to find better opportunities than what Joplin could offer. Robert came in every Tuesday and Thursday for the lunch special, always sat at the counter, always ordered the meatloaf. He was 23, working as an apprentice electrician, and he had the kindest brown eyes I'd ever seen, eyes that crinkled at the corners when he smiled, which was often. He courted me properly, the old-fashioned way. Picked me up at my boarding house, met my landlady, shook her hand, promised to have me home by 10. We went to movies, walked through the park, talked about our dreams. His dreams were simple, beautiful in their simplicity. He wanted a family, a home, a good steady job, and someone to share it all with. I wanted exactly the same things. We got married in 1978 in a small ceremony at the Baptist Church on the corner of Glenstone and Sunshine. I wore my mother's wedding dress, altered to fit me, and carried wildflowers that Robert had picked himself that morning. We started our life together in a tiny apartment above a hardware store. Robert worked long hours, sometimes 6 days a week, building his reputation as a skilled electrician. I worked too, first at the diner, then later at a dentist's office as a receptionist once I got my typing skills up to speed. We saved every penny we could, dreaming of the day we'd have our own house, our own piece of the American dream. Michael came along in 1983. Oh, that boy was the light of our lives from the second he drew breath. Robert cried when he held him for the first time, actual tears streaming down his face as he looked at me and said, "We made this. We made a whole person." We'd been trying for 3 years, had almost given up hope, and then there he was, 7 pounds and 3 ounces of pure miracle. I remember thinking I'd never known love like that existed, the fierce, protective, all-consuming love of a mother for her child. Patty arrived 3 years later, in 1986, and our family felt complete. 2 healthy children, a husband with a growing electrical contracting business, and we'd just made the down payment on a little 3-bedroom house on Maple Street. It wasn't much, needed work, but it was ours. Robert spent every spare moment fixing it up, rewiring the whole place himself, updating the plumbing, refinishing the hardwood floors. I painted every room, sewed curtains, planted flowers in the front yard. We poured our hearts into that house, made it a home. I was a stay-at-home mother, a choice Robert and I made together. His business was doing well enough that we could manage on one income, and we both felt strongly that the kids needed a parent at home, especially in those early years. I threw myself into motherhood with everything I had. Room mother, PTA president, scout troop leader, Sunday school teacher. I was at every soccer game, every school play, every parent-teacher conference. I baked cookies for every bake sale, sewed costumes for every recital, helped with every science project. Michael was a serious child, always thinking, always observing. He loved building things, taking things apart to see how they worked. By the time he was 10, he could help his daddy with basic electrical work. Robert was so proud. "That's my boy," he'd say, ruffling Michael's hair. "Gonna take over the business someday, aren't you, son?" And Michael would nod solemnly, like it was a sacred promise. Patty was my social butterfly, always had a dozen friends, always organizing something. She was the one who wanted the birthday parties, the sleepovers, the drama club, the cheerleading squad. Where Michael was quiet and internal, Patty was loud and external, always needing an audience. I loved that about her, loved her confidence, loved how she could walk into any room and own it. I thought it would serve her well in life. I taught them both the same values my parents had taught me. Be honest, work hard, family first, always family first. Take care of your own. I told them that when they grew up and had their own families, we'd all stay close, help each other out, be there for each other through thick and thin. I told them that was what family meant. That was what made life worth living. I believed every word I said. I believed they did too. The years rolled by in that beautiful, exhausting way they do when you're raising children. Birthday parties and Christmas mornings, scraped knees and first dates, graduations and weddings. Robert's business grew steadily. We weren't rich, not by a long shot, but we were comfortable. We paid our bills on time, took a modest vacation every year, helped the kids with college expenses. We saved what we could, planning for retirement, planning for the future. Michael studied business at Missouri State, got his degree, worked for a few years at a corporate office in Kansas City. He married Jennifer, a nice enough girl from a well-to-do family in Lee Summit, and they had their own ideas about success, big ideas, expensive ideas. They moved back to Springfield when Jennifer got pregnant, said they wanted to be closer to family. I was thrilled, couldn't wait to be a hands-on grandmother. Patty went into real estate, had a natural gift for it with her people skills and her drive. She married Craig Morrison, who worked in insurance, and together they built what looked like a perfect life in one of Springfield's nicer neighborhoods. They had 2 kids, boy and girl, just like Robert and I had. Everything seemed to be falling into place exactly as it should. And then, 4 years ago, everything changed. Robert had a massive heart attack while working on a residential rewiring job. He was 65 years old. We were planning his retirement party for the next month, and then suddenly, he was gone. Just like that. One morning we had breakfast together, kissed goodbye, made plans for dinner, and I never saw him alive again. The young apprentice working with him that day called 911, tried CPR, did everything right, but Robert was dead before the ambulance arrived. I thought the grief would kill me. There were days I wished it would. 43 years with someone, and then you're supposed to just figure out how to live without them? How to fill all those empty hours, empty rooms, empty spaces in your heart. The kids were wonderful at first, I'll give them that. They helped with the funeral arrangements, sorted through Robert's business affairs, checked on me daily. Michael even moved in for a few weeks, said he didn't want me to be alone. But here's the thing about grief, it changes you. And here's the thing about money, it changes people. Robert had been smart about some things. We had a good life insurance policy, the house was paid off, and his business had value even though we sold it. After everything was settled, I found myself, at 64 years old, with assets totaling somewhere around $400,000. The house was worth about $200,000. I had another $150,000 in savings and retirement accounts, and there was some additional money from the business sale and life insurance. For a working-class family from Missouri, that was real money. That was generational money. That was change-your-life money. For my children, it became obsession money. I didn't see it at first. Grief is funny that way, makes you blind to things that should be obvious. I thought Michael was being helpful when he suggested I should let him look over my finances, make sure everything was in order. I thought Patty was being caring when she started dropping by every day, sometimes twice a day, always asking how I was managing, if I needed anything, if I was taking my vitamins, getting enough sleep, eating properly. I thought they loved me. I didn't realize they were circling, vultures waiting for the right moment to strike. The first real sign that something was off came about 6 months after Robert died. I was having trouble sleeping, which wasn't unusual. The grief counselor had said that was normal. But I mentioned it to Patty during one of her visits, and the next day, Michael showed up with a prescription bottle. I talked to Dr. Morrison, he said, referring to a doctor he knew socially through Jennifer's family connections. He said these will help you sleep. You need your rest, Mom. You're not taking care of yourself. I looked at the bottle. Ambien, 10 milligrams. I didn't go see a doctor, I said, confused. Dr. Morrison is doing me a favor, Michael explained smoothly. He knows what you're going through. There's no need for you to sit in a waiting room for hours just to get something that will help. He called it in for you. Something about it felt wrong, but I couldn't quite put my finger on what. And I was so tired, bone deep exhausted in a way that went beyond physical. So I took the pills. And they did help me sleep, knocked me out cold for 8, sometimes 9 hours at a stretch. But I started noticing other things. I'd wake up groggy, confused about what day it was. I'd find dishes in the sink that I didn't remember using. I'd discover the mail had been brought in and sorted, but I had no memory of doing it. Once, I found my checkbook on the kitchen table, open to the register, with entries I didn't remember making. "You're getting forgetful, Mom," Patty said when I mentioned it. "It's normal at your age, especially with everything you've been through. Maybe we should have you talk to a doctor about it." At my age, I was 64 years old, not 90. But I started to doubt myself. Maybe I was getting forgetful. Maybe the grief was affecting me more than I realized. Maybe I really was losing track of things. That doubt, that tiny seed of self-questioning they planted, that was the beginning of their plan. And I walked right into it, trusting and naive, never imagining that my own children would use my grief and confusion as weapons against me. Looking back now, I can see all the warning signs I missed. I can see how carefully they laid the groundwork, how deliberately they positioned themselves. At the time, though, all I saw was 2 children trying to help their widowed mother through the hardest period of her life. I saw what they wanted me to see, and what I couldn't see was about to destroy me. The first year after Robert's death passed in a blur of grief and adjustment. I tried to build a new normal, tried to figure out who Dorothy Henderson was without Robert Henderson by her side. It wasn't easy. Everything reminded me of him. The coffee maker he'd bought me for Christmas 3 years before he died. The recliner where he'd watched football every Sunday. The empty side of the bed that still smelled faintly of his cologne, even months after I'd washed the sheets for the first time. But I pushed forward because that's what you do. That's what my generation does. We don't wallow, we don't fall apart. We grieve, and then we carry on. I joined a widows support group at church. I started volunteering at the local food bank twice a week. I took up watercolor painting, something I'd always wanted to try but never had time for. I was building a life, slowly, painfully, but I was doing it. Michael and Jennifer had settled into a large house in one of Springfield's newer developments, the kind with an HOA and rules about what color you could paint your mailbox. Their son, my grandson Tyler, was 3 years old, and Jennifer was pregnant with their second child. Michael had started his own consulting business, though I was never entirely clear on what exactly he consulted about. Business strategy, he'd say vaguely whenever I asked. Helping companies optimize their operations. What I did know was that they spent money like it was going out of style. New cars every 2 years, elaborate vacations, designer clothes. A kitchen renovation that cost more than my first house. Jennifer didn't work, said she wanted to focus on being a mother, which I respected, but it meant everything depended on Michael's income. And consulting, as best I could tell, was feast or famine work. Patty and Craig seemed more stable. Real estate was going well, Craig's insurance agency was established, and their kids, Emma and Noah, were good students involved in every activity under the sun. They lived in a lovely 2-story colonial in a neighborhood I'd always admired, with a pool in the backyard and a 3-car garage. But there were signs of strain if you looked closely. Whispered arguments that stopped when I entered the room, tension around the edges of Craig's smile, Patty checking her phone constantly, that little crease between her eyebrows deepening every time she looked at her bank account. They both asked about my finances more often than felt comfortable. Michael wanted to know about my investment portfolio, said he had connections who could get me better returns. Patty wanted to know about the house. Had I thought about selling it, maybe moving into something smaller, more manageable? Wouldn't that make sense at my age? They asked about my will. Had I updated it since Daddy died? Had I thought about setting up a trust? Had I considered the tax implications of leaving everything equally? I'd brush them off, change the subject, but they'd circle back around eventually. Always casual, always concerned, always framing it as looking out for my best interests. And because I loved them, because I trusted them, because the idea that my own children might be plotting against me was literally unthinkable, I didn't see what was happening. The sleep medication continued. I'd been taking it for about 8 months when I realized I couldn't seem to function without it anymore. If I tried to go to bed without taking a pill, I'd lie awake for hours, heart racing, mind spinning. So I kept taking them, and Michael kept refilling them, always through that doctor friend who never actually examined me, never asked me questions, just called in prescription after prescription. I started having trouble with my memory during the day, too. I'd go to the grocery store and forget why I was there. I'd start to tell a story and lose the thread halfway through. I'd look at my bank statement and not recognize some of the transactions. Small things, mostly, but they accumulated. They built on each other. They made me doubt myself in ways I never had before. "Mom, I'm worried about you," Jennifer said one afternoon when she'd stopped by with Tyler. We were sitting in my kitchen, watching him play with blocks on the floor. "You seem confused a lot lately." "You tell me the same stories over and over. You forget conversations we've had." I felt a flash of defensiveness, then uncertainty. Did I do that? I couldn't remember. "I'm fine," I said, but even to my own ears, I sounded unconvincing. "It's just been a hard year." "It's been more than a year, Mom," she said gently, "and it's getting worse, not better. Michael and I think you should see a doctor, a specialist, someone who can really evaluate what's going on." There it was again, that feeling that something wasn't quite right, but I couldn't pinpoint it, couldn't articulate what was bothering me. So I nodded. I agreed. I let Michael make me an appointment with a neurologist in Springfield, a doctor who, I would later learn, was a golf buddy of that same Dr. Morrison who'd been prescribing my sleep medication. The appointment was surreal. The neurologist, Dr. Patterson, asked me questions that seemed designed to make me look confused. He'd ask what year it was, then interrupt me halfway through my answer. He'd show me a series of pictures, then ask me about them 20 minutes later, after spending that whole time talking about unrelated topics. He did a physical exam that included a lot of balance tests, coordination tests, things that made me feel clumsy and off-kilter. At the end of the appointment, he sat behind his big mahogany desk and looked at me with practiced sympathy. "Mrs. Henderson, I'm concerned about what I'm seeing. There are some signs of cognitive decline that are consistent with early-stage dementia. It's not severe yet, but these things tend to progress. We'll want to monitor you closely." Dementia. The word hit me like a physical blow. I thought of my mother's sister, Aunt Caroline, who'd had Alzheimer's. I thought of the years of decline, the way she'd forgotten her own children's names, the way she'd eventually forgotten how to feed herself. I thought of ending up like that. And terror seized my chest so hard I could barely breathe. "Are you sure?" I managed to ask. "I mean, couldn't it just be grief, stress? I've been through a lot." Dr. Patterson smiled, that patient, condescending smile I would come to hate. "I understand this is difficult to accept, Mrs. Henderson, but the testing doesn't lie. We'll start you on some medication that may slow the progression, and I'd like to see you back in 3 months. In the meantime, I'm going to strongly recommend that you consider having someone help you manage your affairs. Financial matters, healthcare decisions, that sort of thing. You don't want to wait until you're unable to make those decisions clearly." I left that office in a daze. Michael had driven me to the appointment, said he wanted to be there for support, and now he drove me home while I stared out the window, trying to process what I'd just been told.
It's going to be okay, Mom, Michael said, reaching over to pat my hand.
Patty and I will take care of everything. You don't have to worry about anything. We're going to make sure you're looked after. I should have felt comforted. Instead, I felt something else, something that would take me months more to recognize as dread. That night, I didn't take my sleeping pill. I don't know why. Maybe some instinct for self-preservation kicked in. Maybe some part of me, deep down, was starting to wake up. I lay in bed, wide awake, staring at the ceiling, and thought about that doctor's appointment, thought about the questions, the tests, the diagnosis that had come so quickly, so definitively. And I thought about the fact that Michael had been in the room with me the whole time. The next day, I felt more clear-headed than I had in months. The fog that had been hanging over me seemed thinner, more transparent. I went about my normal routine, but with a new attention to detail. I made a list of everything I did, every phone call I made, every decision, just to prove to myself that I could remember. When Patty stopped by that afternoon, her first question was, "Did you take your medication last night?" Not, "How are you feeling?" Not, "How did the appointment go?" Her very first question was about whether I'd taken a pill. "How did you know I had a doctor's appointment yesterday?" I asked. I was sure I hadn't mentioned it to her. She didn't even blink. "Michael told me, 'We talk every day, Mom. We're worried about you. So did you take your medication?'" Yes, I lied, and I watched her relax, watched the tension leave her shoulders. That was when I knew, on some level, even though I couldn't yet let myself fully believe it, that was when some deep, primal part of me understood that I was in danger. Not from strangers, from my own children. The next few months were a carefully orchestrated campaign, though I didn't fully recognize it as such until much later. Michael and Patty tag-teamed me, never letting more than a day go by without one of them stopping in, checking on me, subtly undermining my confidence, gently questioning my decisions. I mentioned wanting to replace my 15-year-old car, and Michael launched into a 10-minute explanation of why that was fiscally irresponsible, why I should just take Uber if I needed to go somewhere, why keeping a car at my age was dangerous anyway. What if I had an episode while driving? I talked about wanting to take a trip to visit my sister in Arizona, and Patty worried that I might get confused in an unfamiliar place, that I might forget to take my medication, that it wasn't safe for me to travel alone. Maybe she should go with me. And by the way, did I have travel insurance? What if something happened? Every decision I wanted to make, every plan I tried to create, they had a reason why it was a bad idea, why I should reconsider, why it would be better to wait. Always framed as concern, always positioned as protection. Always delivered with hugs and "I love yous" and "we just want what's best for you." I started taking the sleeping pills again, not every night, but most nights, because the pressure of pretending I was fine, of fighting against their constant worry, was exhausting. And when I took the pills, the fog would return, thick and heavy, making everything distant and unclear. Looking back, I think they were crushing up additional medication and putting it in my morning coffee. I think that's why my coffee tasted bitter, why I felt so disoriented in the mornings, why I found pills in my bathroom that I didn't recognize. But at the time, I just thought I was getting sicker. I thought the dementia was progressing faster than expected. I thought I really was losing my mind. 3 months after that first neurologist appointment, I went back for my follow-up. Michael drove me again. Dr. Patterson ran more tests, asked more questions, and delivered his verdict with that same practiced sympathy. "I'm afraid the decline is more rapid than we'd hoped, Mrs. Henderson. Your scores have decreased significantly. We need to have a serious conversation about your care going forward. I don't think it's safe for you to continue living alone." Michael leaned forward in his chair. "What are you recommending, doctor?" "I think Mrs. Henderson needs to be in a supervised care facility, Somewhere she'll have 24-hour support, where medication can be properly managed, where she'll be safe. A nursing home. He was talking about putting me in a nursing home. I was 66 years old, and this man I'd met twice was saying I needed to be in a nursing home. No, I said. My voice came out stronger than I expected. No, I'm not going to a nursing home. I'm fine at home. I can take care of myself. Dr. Patterson and Michael exchanged a look, the kind of look that communicated volumes without words. Mom, Michael said gently, I know this is scary, but we have to think about what's best for you. You're forgetting things. You're confused. Last week, you called me at 2 in the morning asking where Dad was. You don't even remember doing that. I didn't remember doing that. Had I done that? The uncertainty was poison, eating away at my confidence from the inside. I'll think about it, I said, which was the best I could manage. That's all we're asking, Michael said, squeezing my hand. But there was something in his eyes, something that looked almost like triumph, and that look made my blood run cold. Over the next few weeks, the pressure intensified. Patty brought by brochures for retirement communities, glossy pamphlets with pictures of smiling elderly people doing crafts and playing bingo. Michael stopped by with paperwork, power of attorney documents, healthcare proxy forms, all just in case, all standard stuff, all protecting your interests. I didn't sign anything. Some stubborn part of me, maybe the same part that had survived a childhood of poverty and raised 2 children and built a life from nothing, that part refused to give in. And then came the incident that changed everything. It was a Tuesday afternoon in early October. I remember because the leaves were just starting to turn, splashes of red and gold against the gray sky. I was in my kitchen trying to make myself a sandwich when suddenly my heart started racing. My hands shook, sweat broke out on my forehead. The room tilted and I grabbed the counter to steady myself. I managed to call 911 before everything went dark. I woke up in the hospital, tubes in my arms, monitors beeping around me. Michael was there and Patty, both looking worried and grim. A doctor I didn't recognize explained that I'd had a severe panic attack, possibly triggered by my medication, possibly by my declining mental state, possibly by both. We're going to keep you overnight for observation, he said. Your children have expressed serious concerns about your ability to care for yourself. I'm fine, I said, but even as the words left my mouth, I knew how they sounded. I knew how I looked, lying in a hospital bed, because I'd collapsed in my own kitchen. That night, alone in my hospital room, I overheard Michael and Patty talking in the hallway. They didn't know I was awake, didn't know I could hear them. This is perfect, Michael said. This is exactly what we needed. Are you sure we should move this fast? Patty's voice, uncertain. We have to. She's getting more resistant, asking more questions. We need to get her into Shady Oaks while she's still confused enough to go along with it. Once she's there, we can move forward with everything else. Shady Oaks. That was one of the facilities in Patty's brochures. And everything else? What was everything else? I lay there in the dark, heart pounding, finally understanding what was happening. Not fully, not yet, but enough. Enough to know that I was in danger. Enough to know that I needed to fight back. But first, I needed to figure out exactly what they were planning, and I needed to do it before they succeeded in locking me away. The next morning, I played the role they expected. Confused, compliant, uncertain. I nodded when the doctor suggested I might need additional support. I didn't argue when Michael said he'd arranged for a visiting nurse to check on me at home. I let them think their plan was working. But inside, I was wide awake for the first time in months. They released me from the hospital with yet another prescription, this time for anti-anxiety medication to go along with the sleeping pills. I took the bottle Michael handed me and smiled weakly, thanked him for taking care of me. I watched him relax, saw the tension ease from his shoulders. He thought he had me exactly where he wanted me. He had no idea that everything had changed. The first thing I did when I got home was dump every single pill bottle they'd given me down the toilet. The sleeping pills, the anti-anxiety medication, even the vitamins Patty had brought me a few weeks back that I'd thought were just vitamins. All of it went into the toilet, flushed away, gone. If they were drugging me, and I was now certain they were, then I wasn't going to make it easy for them anymore. That night was hell. My body screamed for the medication it had become dependent on. I shook, I sweated, I paced my bedroom floor until dawn. But I didn't take anything. I white-knuckled my way through it because I needed my mind clear. I needed to think. By morning, the fog had lifted even more. It was like someone had turned on lights in a room I'd been stumbling through in darkness. I could think clearly, remember things sharply, notice details I'd been missing. And what I noticed terrified me. There were things missing from my house. Small things, things I might not have noticed in my drugged haze, but now they stood out. My mother's silver tea service was gone from the dining room hutch. The antique clock that had belonged to Robert's grandfather was missing from the mantel. A small oil painting I'd inherited from my aunt, worth maybe $3,000 or $4,000, had vanished from the hallway. I went through the house systematically, taking inventory. So many things were gone. Not everything, they'd been clever about that, but enough. Enough that if I tried to sell the house and these items weren't here, there would be questions. Enough that they were already helping themselves to my assets before they'd even gotten me out of the way. The rage that filled me was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. This wasn't the hot anger of a moment, the flash of temper that burns out quickly. This was cold, calculated fury that settled into my bones and made my hands stop shaking. This was the anger of a woman who'd worked her whole life, sacrificed everything for her children, only to have them steal from her while pretending to care. But I couldn't let them know I knew. Not yet. I needed more information. I needed to understand the full scope of what they were planning. I called Michael that afternoon, kept my voice shaky and uncertain. "Honey, I can't find my mother's tea service. Did I loan it to someone? I can't remember." There was a pause, just a fraction of a second too long. "I think you donated it to the church auction, Mom. Remember? A few months ago, you said you wanted to support the fundraiser." A lie. A smooth, practiced lie delivered without hesitation. I'd never donated that tea service to anyone. It was one of the few things I had from my mother, and I'd always planned to give it to Patty someday. "Oh," I said, letting confusion color my voice. "I don't remember that. Are you sure?" "I'm sure, Mom. You were really happy about it at the time. Said it was going to a good cause." He was so convincing. If I hadn't known better, if I hadn't been clear-headed enough to know my own mind, I might have believed him. I might have thought I really was losing my memory, really had donated valuable family heirlooms without remembering. That was the first concrete sign I documented. I started a notebook that day, hidden in the bottom of my sewing basket, where I knew they'd never look. I wrote down every lie, every missing item, every suspicious interaction. I recorded dates, times, exact words. I was building a case, even though I didn't yet know what I'd do with it. The second sign came 3 days later. I'd stopped taking all medication, was suffering through the withdrawal in silence, and my mind was clearer than it had been in over a year. I decided to check my bank statements, really check them, not just glance at the bottom line like I'd been doing. What I found made my stomach turn. There were transfers I didn't remember making. $500 here, $1,000 there, sometimes $2,000 at a time. Always to Michael's account or Patty's account, always with memo lines like loan or gift or helping with expenses. Over the past 14 months, nearly $40,000 had left my accounts in these small, regular transfers. $40,000, and I had no memory of authorizing any of it. I sat at my kitchen table, staring at those statements, and felt something break inside me. Not my spirit, but my last lingering hope that maybe I was wrong, maybe I was misunderstanding, maybe my children weren't really doing what I thought they were doing. They were stealing from me, systematically, deliberately stealing from me, while simultaneously convincing me I was losing my mind. The third sign came during one of Patty's check-in visits. She let herself in with the key I'd given her years ago, found me in the living room working on a watercolor painting I'd started. "Mom, we need to talk about something," she said, sitting down across from me with that serious expression she used when she wanted to seem concerned. "Michael and I had been talking, and we really think it's time to make some decisions about your care." "What kind of decisions?" I asked, keeping my voice mild. "Well, Shady Oaks has an opening. It's a really nice facility, Mom. Private rooms, activities, nurses on staff 24 hours. You'd be safe there. You'd have people to help you. You wouldn't have to worry about anything." "I'm not ready for a nursing home, Patty." "It's not a nursing home. It's an assisted living facility. There's a difference. And the thing is, the opening won't last long. These places have waiting lists. If we don't move on this now, you might not get another chance for months, maybe a year." There it was, the pressure, the urgency, the subtle threat that if I didn't do what they wanted right now, I'd lose my opportunity and it would be my own fault. "I need to think about it," I said. Patty's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "There's nothing to think about, Mom. You can't live alone anymore. You had a panic attack so severe you had to go to the hospital. What if that happens again and no one is here? What if you fall? What if you forget to turn off the stove and burn the house down?" Fear tactics, making me doubt myself, making me afraid of my own home, my own capabilities. "I'll think about it," I repeated, firmer this time. She left frustrated, and I knew I was running out of time. They were going to push harder now. They were going to escalate. The fourth sign came in the form of a phone call from my bank. A very polite woman asked if I'd authorized a new joint account holder on my checking account. "I'm sorry, what?" I said. "We have paperwork here adding Michael Henderson as a joint account holder with full access to your checking account. I'm just calling to verify this is something you authorized." "When was this paperwork submitted?" I asked, my heart pounding. "Let me see. It was processed 3 days ago. It has your signature on it, but we like to verify these things with a phone call for accounts with significant balances." "I did not authorize that," I said clearly. "That is not my signature, or if it is, someone forged it. I do not want anyone added to my account." There was a pause. "I see. Well, in that case, we'll flag this as suspicious activity and put a freeze on any changes to the account. You should come in person to verify your identity and review your account security." I went to the bank that same afternoon. The branch manager, a woman named Patricia Chen, who I'd known for years, pulled me into her office and showed me the paperwork. It was my signature, or a very good copy of it, but I had never signed that document. I'd never even seen it before. "Mrs. Henderson, I have to ask," Patricia said gently, "is everything okay at home? Are you feeling pressured by anyone?" I wanted to tell her everything. I wanted to break down and explain what my children were doing to me, but I didn't know who to trust anymore, didn't know who might call Michael or Patty out of concern for my declining mental state. So I just said I wanted my accounts locked down tight, no changes without me physically appearing in the bank with identification, no joint account holders, no beneficiary changes, nothing without my in-person authorization. Patricia made it happen. She also quietly suggested I might want to speak with an attorney about protecting my assets. She didn't say from whom, but we both knew. The fifth sign was the most chilling. I found it by accident, hidden in a stack of mail that Michael had helpfully sorted for me during one of his visits. It was a brochure for Shady Oaks, and tucked inside was a form, partially filled out. An admission form with my information already entered: name, date of birth, social security number, medical conditions. Under medical conditions, someone had written early stage dementia, anxiety disorder, possible Alzheimer's. Under the section for financial responsibility, they'd written Michael's name and contact information as the responsible party. Under emergency contact, Patty's information. Under the section asking who would have power of attorney to make medical and financial decisions on my behalf, both their names were listed. At the bottom of the form, there was a line for my signature. It was blank, but there was a sticky note attached in Patty's handwriting. Get her to sign this at the next doctor's appointment. Tell her it's just routine paperwork. Dr. P will notarize. Dr. P, Dr. Patterson, the neurologist who diagnosed me with dementia after 2 appointments. The same Dr. Patterson who was friends with the doctor who'd been prescribing me medication without ever examining me. They had it all planned out. Get me drugged and confused, get a diagnosis from a friendly doctor, get me to sign papers I didn't understand, and move me into a facility where they could control every aspect of my life. Once I was there, once they had power of attorney, they could do whatever they wanted with my money, my house, my assets. They could bleed me dry, and I'd be helpless to stop them. The sixth sign came when I decided to test something. I mentioned to Michael, casually, that I'd been thinking about updating my will. The reaction was immediate and barely controlled. "Why would you need to do that, Mom? Your will is fine. Dad made sure everything was in order." "I just think maybe I should review it, make sure it still reflects what I want." "What do you want?" The question came out sharper than he probably intended. "I don't know yet. That's why I want to review it with an attorney." "I can help you with that. I know a guy, works with Jennifer's family. He's an estate planning specialist. I'll set up an appointment." "I'd rather use someone else," I said, watching his face carefully. His eyes went cold for just a second, just a flicker, before the concerned sun mask slipped back into place. "Sure, Mom, whatever makes you comfortable, but you should probably wait until you're feeling better. You don't want to make important decisions when you're not thinking clearly." There it was again, the subtle undermining, the suggestion that I couldn't be trusted to make my own decisions. The seventh sign was physical evidence I found in my own trash can. I'd stopped taking the sleeping pills they gave me, but I pretended I was still taking them. I'd flush them, but leave the empty bottles visible. What I found was an empty pill bottle in my trash, but it wasn't one of the bottles I'd been given. It was a prescription bottle with my name on it for a medication called lorazepam, filled at a pharmacy I'd never been to, prescribed by Dr. Morrison, the Dr. Michael knew socially. I looked up lorazepam. It was a benzodiazepine used for anxiety, but also known to cause confusion, memory problems, and cognitive impairment, especially in elderly patients, especially when combined with other medications, especially when crushed up and put in someone's coffee without their knowledge. They weren't just stealing my money, they were systematically destroying my mental capacity, so no one would believe me if I tried to fight back. I need to pause here for just a moment because I know some of you watching this might be going through something similar. Maybe you're noticing things disappearing, maybe you're being told you're confused when you know you're not, maybe someone who's supposed to love you is making you doubt your own mind. If that's you, please, I'm begging you, trust your instincts. Hit that like button if you think something feels wrong in your own life, and drop a comment telling me what you'd do if you found out someone was drugging you. Your engagement helps this story reach other women who need to hear it, who need to know they're not crazy, they're not imagining things. Sometimes the people closest to us are the most dangerous, and we need to look out for each other. Thank you for being here, for listening, for helping spread these real stories that the world needs to hear. The eighth and final sign I documented came during what was supposed to be another routine doctor's appointment with Dr. Patterson. Michael drove me, like always, but this time I was completely clear-headed. This time I was paying attention to every word, every gesture, every glance exchanged between my son and my doctor. Dr. Patterson went through his usual routine, the questions designed to make me seem confused, the memory tests with interruptions. But I was ready this time. I answered clearly. I didn't let him rattle me. I pushed back when he tried to put words in my mouth. I saw the frustration in his eyes. I saw him look at Michael with something like confusion. This wasn't going according to their plan. "Mrs. Henderson, I'm concerned that you seem to be in denial about your condition," he said finally. "Your son tells me you've been resistant to the idea of assisted living. Is that true?" "I don't need assisted living," I said clearly. "I'm managing fine at home." "Are you taking your medications regularly?" "Yes," I lied smoothly. "Two could play this game." "All of them? The Ambien, the lorazepam, the Lexapro?" He rattled off names. Some I recognized, some I didn't. "I take what I'm prescribed," I said, which was technically true since I wasn't prescribed most of those medications legitimately. He made notes, his pen scratching across the paper with what seemed like extra force. "I'm going to recommend we increase your dosages. You seem agitated today, which suggests the current levels aren't adequate." "I'm not agitated. I'm clear-headed and thinking straight for the first time in months." The words hung in the air. Michael shifted in his chair. Dr. Patterson's expression went very still. "Mrs. Henderson, one of the symptoms of cognitive decline is a lack of awareness of the decline itself. Patients often feel they're thinking more clearly when, in fact, they're experiencing a temporary lucid period before further deterioration." He was good. I had to give him that. He had an answer for everything, a medical explanation that made me sound sick no matter what I said. But I wasn't backing down. Not anymore. "I'd like a second opinion," I said, "from a neurologist who isn't friends with the doctor who's been prescribing me medication without examining me." You could have heard a pin drop. Michael stood up abruptly. "Mom, that's ridiculous. Dr. Patterson is one of the best neurologists in Springfield." "Then he won't mind me getting a second opinion." I stood too, meeting my son's eyes directly. "I'm done with this appointment. I'm going home." I walked out of that office with my head high, leaving both of them staring after me. I took a taxi home, refusing to get in the car with Michael. I knew I'd crossed a line, knew I'd revealed too much, knew they'd realize I was onto them. I knew they were going to escalate, and I was right. The phone calls started that same night. First Michael, then Patty, then both of them together on a conference call. They were worried, they said. I was acting erratically. I was being paranoid. I was refusing necessary medical care. They just wanted to help me. Why was I fighting them? I kept my answers short, my tone calm. I was fine. I didn't need help. I wanted to be left alone for a few days to think. That last part was a mistake. I should have known not to ask for space, not to give them time to plan without supervision. 3 days later, I woke up to pounding on my front door. I looked out the window and saw an ambulance, a police car, and both of my children standing on my front lawn, looking appropriately distressed. I opened the door to find 2 paramedics and a police officer. "Mrs. Henderson," the officer said, "we received a wellness check call. Your children are concerned about your well-being." "I'm fine," I said, but even as the words left my mouth, I knew how this looked. I probably looked disheveled, I'd barely slept, I was stressed and frightened, and it showed. "Ma'am, your son says you've been diagnosed with dementia, and you've stopped taking your medication. He says you've been acting erratically, and he's concerned you might hurt yourself. I am not going to hurt myself. I don't have dementia. I have children who are trying to steal from me. The officer and the paramedics exchanged that look. That look that said, confused elderly woman doesn't know what she's saying, probably exactly what the family described. Michael stepped forward, tears actually glistening in his eyes. Oscar-worthy performance. Mom, please, let them check you over. Let them help you. We're so worried. I don't need help. I need you to leave me alone. But they didn't leave. They couldn't legally force me to go to the hospital, not without a court order, but they wouldn't leave either. They stood there, on my porch, in my yard, making their concern very visible to all my neighbors who were now watching from their windows and lawns. Finally, to make them go away, I agreed to let the paramedics check my vital signs. Blood pressure elevated, which wasn't surprising given the circumstances. Heart rate fast, also not surprising. They asked me questions. Do you know what day it is? Who's the president? Can you count backward from 100 by sevens? I answered everything correctly. I was coherent, oriented, clearly not in medical distress. They couldn't force me to do anything. But the damage was done. The whole neighborhood had seen an ambulance and police at my house. They'd seen my children crying, seen me arguing with authorities. The story would spread. Crazy old Dorothy Henderson thinks her kids are stealing from her, won't take her medicine, had to have the police called. It was a power move, a show of force, a message that they could make me look incompetent anytime they wanted, that they could weaponize the authorities and medical professionals against me, that I was isolated and alone and no one would believe me. After they left, I sat in my living room and faced the truth. I couldn't fight this alone. I needed help. I needed someone who would believe me, someone who could see what was happening, someone with the power and knowledge to stop it. I needed a lawyer, but not just any lawyer. I needed someone who specialized in elder law, someone who'd seen this kind of family financial abuse before, someone who wouldn't be swayed by my children's tears and protestations and medical documentation. I spent that entire night researching on my laptop, reading reviews, looking for someone who wasn't connected to Michael or Patty's social circles, someone who had a reputation for being tough and skeptical and willing to fight. I found her at 3 a.m, Margaret Sullivan, attorney at law, specializing in elder abuse and exploitation. Her website showed an older woman with steel gray hair and sharp eyes, and her bio mentioned that she'd gotten into elder law after watching her own mother be victimized by family members. She'd understand. She had to. I called her office first thing the next morning and got an appointment for that afternoon. I didn't tell Michael or Patty. I didn't tell anyone. I took an Uber to her office in a building downtown, carrying my hidden notebook and a folder full of bank statements I'd carefully printed out and hidden in my sewing room. Margaret Sullivan was exactly what I needed. She listened without interrupting as I poured out everything that had happened. She took notes, asked sharp questions. Didn't once suggest that I might be confused or mistaken. When I finished, she sat back in her chair and looked at me with something like grim satisfaction. Mrs. Henderson, what your children are doing has a name. It's called undue influence and financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult. And yes, it's illegal. And yes, we can fight it. But I need to be honest with you, it's going to be hard. They've laid careful groundwork. They have medical documentation. They're positioning themselves as concerned children, caring for an incompetent mother. Judges and juries want to believe that children love their parents, that they wouldn't do something like this. But they are doing it, I said. I'm not crazy. I'm not confused. I know exactly what's happening. I believe you, Margaret said, and those 3 words nearly broke me. I've seen this before, more times than you'd think. Adult children who see their elderly parents as nothing more than an ATM. who can't wait for them to die so they can get their hands on the inheritance. It's one of the most heartbreaking forms of abuse because it's invisible. It happens behind closed doors. The victim is isolated and discredited. No one wants to believe it's happening. So what do I do? First, we document everything. Second, we get you a real medical evaluation from a doctor I know and trust, someone who can't be influenced by your children. Third, we lock down your assets so tight that a nuclear bomb couldn't get through. Fourth, we go on the offensive. What does that mean? Margaret smiled, and it was not a kind smile. It was the smile of a predator who just spotted prey. It means we stop playing defense. It means we make them very sorry they ever tried to steal from you. For the first time in months, I felt something other than fear and confusion. I felt hope. And more than that, I felt rage. Cold, focused, righteous rage. My children wanted to destroy me to get my money? Well, they were about to find out exactly what their mother was made of, and it wasn't nearly as soft or weak as they'd assumed. The war was on, and I was done being a victim. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of careful strategy and meticulous planning. Margaret Sullivan didn't mess around. She moved with the efficiency of someone who'd fought these battles before and knew exactly where to strike for maximum impact. The first thing we did was get me a complete medical workup from a gerontologist Margaret trusted, a doctor named Elena Rodriguez, who had no connections to Michael, Patty, or their network of cooperative medical professionals. Dr. Rodriguez was thorough in ways Dr. Patterson had never been. She ran actual cognitive tests, not the simplified, interruption-filled versions designed to make me look confused. She did blood work to check for everything from vitamin deficiencies to evidence of medication I shouldn't have been taking. She spent 3 hours with me, asking detailed questions about my medical history, my daily functioning, my concerns. Her conclusion was definitive and documented in a detailed medical report. I showed no signs of dementia or significant cognitive decline. My memory was appropriate for my age. My reasoning was sound. My ability to manage my own affairs was unimpaired. What I did show signs of was recent benzodiazepine use, despite not being legitimately prescribed any benzodiazepines, and symptoms consistent with having been systematically drugged. That report was ammunition, legal, medical, undeniable ammunition. The second thing Margaret did was help me lock down my finances in ways that would take a crowbar and a court order to undo. We moved my money to a new bank, one that Michael and Patty didn't know about. We set up accounts that required dual signatures for any withdrawals over $100, with Margaret as the cosigner. We put alerts on everything, flagged any suspicious activity, created a paper trail that would stand up in any court. Then we went through my house with a videographer Margaret hired, documenting every single item of value, every piece of furniture, every painting, every piece of jewelry, creating an inventory of what remained and what was missing. That video was time-stamped and notarized, legal proof of my assets and their current state. Margaret also had me write out everything I could remember, every conversation, every incident, every lie I'd caught them in. She had me go through my phone records and highlight every call from Michael or Patty, create a timeline of their increased contact that corresponded with when they'd started their plan. We built a case, brick by brick, evidence by evidence. The thing you need to understand, Margaret told me during one of our meetings, is that this isn't just about stopping them. This is about making sure they can never try this again, with you or with anyone else. This is about consequences severe enough that they'll regret every single thing they did. What kind of consequences? I asked. Well, there are criminal charges we could pursue. Financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult is a felony in Missouri. Fraud, forgery, if we can prove they faked your signature on that bank document. potentially even attempted kidnapping if we can show that the plan to force you into Shady Oaks was against your will. Criminal charges against my own children. The thought made me feel sick, but also grimly satisfied. They'd been willing to destroy my life for money. Why should I protect them from the consequences of their choices? But, Margaret continued, criminal charges require proof beyond a reasonable doubt, and prosecutors are often reluctant to take on family cases like this. They see it as a civil matter. So we need to be strategic. We need leverage. What kind of leverage? The kind that comes from letting them think they're winning. Right up until the moment we pull the rug out from under them. And that's when Margaret explained her plan. It was brilliant, ruthless, and perfectly designed to give them exactly what they deserved. The plan hinged on letting Michael and Patty think they'd succeeded. We would let them believe I'd agreed to move into Shady Oaks. We'd let them think I'd signed over power of attorney. We'd let them start the process of liquidating my assets, making their intentions clear and undeniable. And then, at the moment when they were most exposed, most committed to their course of action, most confident in their victory, we'd strike. But first, I had to play along. I had to be the confused, compliant mother they wanted me to be one more time. It was harder than I'd imagined it would be. I called Michael and Patty, told them in a shaky voice that I'd been thinking about what they said, that maybe they were right. Maybe I did need more help than I could get at home. I could hear the relief in their voices, the barely contained excitement. "Oh, Mom," Patty said, "I'm so glad you're seeing reason. This is the best thing for you, I promise." Seeing reason, as if wanting to maintain my independence and protect my assets from thieves was unreasonable. They came over that evening, both of them, with Jennifer and Craig in tow. They brought Chinese food, trying to make it a celebration. They brought paperwork, lots of paperwork, spread it across my dining room table with practiced efficiency. "These are just formalities," Michael said, pointing to various documents. "This one gives me power of attorney so I can manage your bills and healthcare decisions. This one is the admission form for Shady Oaks. This one transfers your house into a trust that Patty and I will manage for you to protect it from having to be sold for medical expenses." Every single document was designed to strip me of control over my own life. Every single one would give them complete access to everything I owned, and they expected me to just sign, to hand over everything I'd worked my whole life for, to trust them with the power to make every decision about my future. I picked up a pen. My hand shook, but not from fear or confusion, from rage so intense I could barely control it. "Where do I sign?" I asked, my voice weak and uncertain. Michael pointed to the signature lines, one after another. I signed Dorothy Henderson in my slightly shaky handwriting, just like a confused elderly woman might. I signed away my power of attorney. I signed the admission form for Shady Oaks. I signed the trust documents for my house. Every signature was fake. Margaret had taught me how to make them look real, but legally invalid, tiny variations that a handwriting expert could identify as not quite right, signatures made under duress or without proper understanding, signatures that could be challenged in court. But Michael and Patty didn't know that. They watched me sign with barely concealed triumph. They thought they'd won. "When do I move?" I asked quietly. "Shady Oaks has a room available next week," Patty said. "We thought we'd start packing up some of your things this weekend, just the essentials at first. Then we can gradually move everything else." Move everything else. She meant sell everything else, liquidate my assets, divide the proceeds between themselves. "Okay," I said, "whatever you think is best." After they left, I sat in my empty dining room and cried. Not from sadness, but from sheer fury. They'd sat at my table, eaten food with me, smiled at me, hugged me, all while planning to rob me blind. They were my children, people I'd given life to, raised, loved with every fiber of my being. And this was what I meant to them? A bank account, an obstacle to overcome, a problem to be managed. But I had one advantage they didn't know about. I knew exactly what they were doing.
And I was ready. Margaret's plan moved into its next phase. Over the following week, I played my role perfectly. I let Patty come over and help me pack. I watched her sort through my belongings, deciding what was worth taking to Shady Oaks and what could be donated or sold. I saw her eyes linger on my jewelry box, my mother's china, the few valuable antiques I had left. I let Michael sit at my kitchen table and go through my mail, my bills, my financial statements from the old bank that he still thought was my only account. I watched him make notes, create spreadsheets, calculate exactly how much he'd have access to once the power of attorney went into effect. All the while, Margaret and her team were gathering evidence. We had a private investigator following the paper trail of those mysterious transfers from my account to theirs. We had Margaret's associate checking real estate records to see if they'd already started the process of listing my house. We had Dr.
Rodriguez's medical report and Dr. Patterson's contradictory diagnosis ready to show exactly what had been done to me. The day before I was supposed to move into Shady Oaks, Michael came over with final paperwork, transfer documents for my bank accounts, a new will that he'd helped me draft that left everything equally to him and Patty, cutting out my grandchildren entirely, which I never would have wanted. Documents to sell my car, since I wouldn't need it in assisted living. "Just a few more signatures, Mom," he said, spreading them across the table. I looked at my son, really looked at him, tried to find some trace of the little boy who'd cried in my arms when his goldfish died, who'd been so proud the first time he helped his daddy with an electrical job, who told me I was the best mom in the world at least 1,000 times throughout his childhood. That boy was gone. Or maybe he'd never really existed. Maybe I'd just seen what I wanted to see. Believed what I wanted to believe because the alternative was too painful to accept. "Michael," I said slowly, "before I sign these, I need to ask you something." He looked up, wariness flickering across his face. "What is it, Mom?" "Did you ever love me, really love me, or was I always just money to you?" His expression went carefully blank. "Of course I love you, Mom. That's why I'm doing all this, to protect you, to take care of you." "You're lying," I said softly. "You're lying to my face, and you don't even have the decency to look ashamed about it." "Mom, you're confused." "I'm not confused." The words came out louder than I intended, sharp and clear. "I'm not confused. I'm not demented. I'm not incompetent. I know exactly what you and Patty have been doing. The drugging, the stealing, the lies, all of it. I know everything." Michael's face went white, then red. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Yes, you do. You know exactly what I'm talking about." And so does Margaret Sullivan, my attorney, who has documented every single thing you've done. So does Dr. Elena Rodriguez, who's proved I don't have dementia and that I've been drugged with medications I was never legitimately prescribed. So does the private investigator who's been tracking where my money has been going. We all know, Michael, and it's over. He stood up so fast his chair fell backward. "You can't prove any of that. You're a sick old woman with dementia, and any court will see that. I have medical records from Dr. Patterson. You have fraudulent medical records from a doctor who never properly evaluated me, who colluded with you to create a false diagnosis. That's what you have. And when this goes to court, everyone will know it. You're not taking this to court. You won't do that to your own children. Watch me." The mask dropped completely then. The concerned son vanished, replaced by something cold and calculating that I'd never seen before. Or maybe I had seen it and I just refused to recognize it. You'll lose, he said flatly. Even if you fight this, even if you get some lawyer to take your case, you'll lose. Because I'll make sure everyone knows you're crazy. I'll make sure every doctor, every judge, every person who matters thinks you're a demented old woman who's imagining things. I'll put you in Shady Oaks anyway, and this time you won't get out. Try it, I said. Go ahead and try. Because I'm not scared of you anymore, Michael. I'm not confused, I'm not weak, and I'm definitely not going down without a fight. You want my money that badly? You're going to have to work for it, and it's going to cost you everything. He stared at me for a long moment, and I saw the exact second he decided I was a threat that needed to be eliminated. Not his mother, not a person he loved, a threat. You'll regret this, he said quietly. The only thing I regret is not seeing what you really were sooner. He left without another word, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows. I stood there, shaking with adrenaline and fury, and something that felt almost like grief for the son I'd thought I had, but apparently never did. I called Margaret immediately. It's done. He knows I'm on to them. Good, she said. Then it's time to move to the final phase. Are you ready? Was I ready? Ready to destroy my children's lives the way they tried to destroy mine? Ready to pursue criminal charges, civil suits, public exposure of what they'd done? I'm ready, I said, and I meant it. Margaret's plan for the final confrontation was precise and devastating. We weren't just going to stop Michael and Patty. We were going to expose them, legally and publicly, in a way that would leave no doubt about what they tried to do. The execution began with a meeting Margaret arranged at her office, ostensibly to discuss my care arrangements. Michael and Patty received formal letters from Margaret Sullivan, attorney at law, requesting their presence for a family meeting regarding my estate and care planning. They thought they were being invited to finalize the paperwork to make everything official. They had no idea they were walking into an ambush. The morning of the meeting, I got dressed with more care than I had in months. I wore a navy blue suit that Robert had always said made me look professional and competent. I did my hair, put on makeup, made sure I looked like anything but a confused elderly woman losing her mind. Margaret had coached me on how to present myself, how to speak, how to project confidence and clarity. Remember, she'd said, you are not the victim here. You are the plaintiff. You are the person seeking justice. Walk in there like you own the room, because legally, you're about to own them. Michael and Patty arrived at Margaret's office at 10 in the morning sharp. Both dressed in business casual, both wearing expressions of barely concealed impatience. They thought this was a formality, a rubber stamp on plans already in motion. They'd probably already started spending my money in their minds, planning what they'd buy with their inheritance once I was safely tucked away in Shady Oaks. They walked into the conference room and stopped short when they saw who else was there. Margaret sat at the head of the table, looking like the legal predator she was. Next to her was Dr. Elena Rodriguez, my real doctor, the one who'd actually evaluated me properly. Across from them was a man in a police uniform, Detective James Warren from the Springfield Police Department's Financial Crimes Unit. And there was a court reporter, fingers poised over her machine, ready to record every word spoken in that room. And there was me, sitting calmly at the other end of the table, meeting my children's eyes without flinching. "What is this?" Michael demanded. "Mom, what's going on?" "Sit down, Mr. Henderson," Margaret said, her voice cold and professional. "Both of you. This meeting is being recorded and transcribed. You're going to want to hear what we have to say." They sat, slowly, their expressions shifting from confusion to wariness to something approaching fear. Margaret opened a folder in front of her, thick with documents. "Let's begin. Mrs. Dorothy Henderson has retained my services to address what she believes to be systematic financial exploitation and abuse by her adult children. Over the past several weeks, we've conducted a thorough investigation into these allegations. What we found is extensive evidence of fraud, forgery, undue influence, and financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult. "This is ridiculous," Patty said, but her voice shook slightly. "Our mother has dementia. She's confused. She doesn't know what she's saying." Dr. Rodriguez spoke up. "Mrs. Henderson does not have dementia. I've conducted a complete neurological and cognitive evaluation. Her memory, reasoning, and decision-making capabilities are all within normal ranges for her age. What she does show evidence of is recent benzodiazepine use, despite having no legitimate prescriptions for such medications. She also shows symptoms consistent with having been systematically drugged over an extended period." "That's absurd," Michael said, but he'd gone pale. "Who are you anyway?" Dr. Alina Rodriguez, board-certified gerontologist and neurologist. "I've been practicing for 23 years, and I've testified as an expert witness in over 50 cases of elder abuse. My credentials are impeccable, and my findings are medically sound. Your mother is not incompetent. She has been deliberately made to appear incompetent through the use of unprescribed medications." Margaret slid a document across the table. "This is a toxicology report showing the presence of lorazepam and other benzodiazepines in Miss Henderson's system, despite her having no legitimate prescriptions for these drugs. We also have evidence of prescriptions written in her name by Dr. Morrison, a general practitioner who never actually examined her, prescriptions that were filled and allegedly given to Mrs. Henderson by her son, Michael Henderson." Michael's jaw tightened. "I was helping my mother manage her medications. That's not a crime." "It is when the medications are obtained fraudulently and administered without the patient's knowledge or consent. It's called drugging someone, Mr. Henderson, and yes, it is very much a crime." Detective Warren leaned forward. "I've been reviewing the evidence Miss Sullivan has provided. We have probable cause to believe that crimes have been committed here: financial exploitation, fraud, possibly forgery in the case of the bank documents attempting to add Mr. Henderson as a joint account holder. These are felonies under Missouri law." The room went very quiet. I watched my children's faces as the reality of their situation began to sink in. This wasn't a family squabble. This wasn't something they could smooth over with tears and apologies. This was real legal trouble, the kind that could end with criminal charges and prison time. "You can't prove any of this," Patty said, but she sounded desperate now, not confident. "It's her word against ours." Margaret smiled, and it wasn't a nice smile. "Actually, we can prove quite a bit. Let's start with the financial exploitation, shall we?" She pulled out bank statements, highlighted and annotated. Over the past 14 months, approximately $42,000 has been transferred from Mrs. Henderson's accounts to accounts belonging to Michael Henderson and Patricia Morrison. Mrs. Henderson has no memory of authorizing these transfers. We've obtained her banking records, showing that many of these transfers occurred during periods when she was heavily medicated, and some occurred via online banking from IP addresses that trace back to Mr. Henderson's home and Mrs. Morrison's real estate office. She let that sink in. We also have evidence of missing personal property, items of significant value that have disappeared from Mrs. Henderson's home during this same time period. A silver tea service worth approximately $3,000, an antique clock valued at $1,500, several pieces of jewelry, and oil painting. The total value of missing items exceeds $20,000. "Mom probably donated those things and forgot," Michael tried. She was confused. "Mrs. Henderson kept meticulous records of all donations for tax purposes," Margaret countered. "There are no records of any such donations.
However, we do have security camera footage from a local antique dealer showing Mrs. Morrison selling a silver tea service matching the description of the missing one, and we have a receipt with her signature. Would you like to see it? Patty's face went ashen. She'd been so careful, or so she thought. She'd never imagined that I'd fight back, that I'd have the resources and the will to investigate what she'd done. Margaret continued, relentless. We also have the fraudulent medical diagnosis. Dr. Pattison's evaluation of Mrs. Henderson was cursory at best, medically unsound at worst. We have evidence that he's socially connected to both Dr. Morrison, who was prescribing the medications, and to Mr. Henderson through business associations. We have testimony from Mrs. Henderson about conversations she overheard planning to get her to sign documents under false pretenses. We have the documents themselves, which Mrs. Henderson signed under duress and without proper understanding of their contents, making them legally invalid. And we have this, she said, sliding across a copy of the note in Patty's handwriting. Get her to sign this at the next doctor's appointment. Tell her it's just routine paperwork. Dr.
P will notarize. She looked at Patty. That's your handwriting, isn't it, Mrs. Morrison? You were planning to trick your mother into signing herself into a nursing home so you could take control of her assets. Patty said nothing. What could she say? It was right there in black and white, in her own handwriting, proof of conspiracy and intent to defraud. Detective Warren spoke up again. At this point, based on the evidence, I have enough for probable cause to pursue criminal charges, financial exploitation of the elderly, fraud, forgery, conspiracy, and potentially more as the investigation continues. We're looking at felony charges that carry significant prison time. Michael found his voice. You're going to send your own son to prison? Your daughter? We're your family, Mom. I'd been silent through all of this, letting Margaret and the others present the facts, build the case. But now I spoke, and my voice was steady and clear. You stopped being my family the moment you decided I was worth more to you, dead or incompetent, than alive and well. You drugged me, you stole from me, you tried to have me declared mentally unfit and locked away in a facility so you could take everything I worked my entire life to build. You used my love for you as a weapon against me, so don't you dare talk to me about family. We just wanted what was rightfully ours, Patty said, and there were actually tears in her eyes now. You were going to leave it to us anyway, we just needed it now. Michael's business is failing. I'm drowning in debt. We needed that money. So you decided to take it, I said, without asking, without my consent, by making me think I was losing my mind, by destroying my reputation in my own community, by taking away my freedom and my dignity. That's not need, Patty. That's greed. That's cruelty. Margaret let the silence hang for a moment before speaking again. Here's where we are. We have enough evidence to pursue criminal charges that could result in both of you serving significant prison time. We also have grounds for a civil suit that would require you to return every penny you took, plus damages, plus legal fees. Between the criminal and civil cases, you're looking at losing everything, including quite possibly your own homes, your savings, your futures. She paused. However, Mrs. Henderson is willing to offer you an alternative. Both Michael and Patty looked at me with desperate hope. They still thought they could get out of this somehow, still thought their mother would save them. The alternative is this, Margaret said. You will immediately return every penny you took from Mrs. Henderson. Every transfer will be reversed. Every item you sold will be replaced with equivalent value. You will sign affidavits admitting to what you did, sworn statements that can be used against you if you ever try anything like this again. You will relinquish any claim to Mrs. Henderson's estate, now or in the future. You will have no contact with her whatsoever unless she initiates it.
and you will both seek professional help, therapy, to address whatever is broken in you that made you think this was acceptable. And if we do all that, Michael asked, then Mrs. Henderson will not press criminal charges at this time. The evidence will be held in escrow with the police and the state attorney's office. If you ever violate the terms of this agreement, if you ever try to contact your mother to harass or manipulate her, if you ever try anything like this again with anyone else, the full weight of the law comes down on you. You'll be arrested, charged, and prosecuted to the fullest extent possible. This is blackmail, Michael said. No, Detective Warren corrected. This is mercy. More mercy than you deserve, frankly. Your mother could send you both to prison right now.
She's choosing to give you a chance to make this right. I suggest you take it. I watched them process their options: prison, public exposure, losing everything, or admit what they'd done, give back what they'd stolen, and walk away with their freedom, if not their dignity. We need time to think about it, Patty said. You have until 5 o'clock today, Margaret said. After that, Detective Warren proceeds with arrests, and the offer is off the table permanently. The meeting ended. Michael and Patty left without looking at me, without saying a word. I sat in that conference room surrounded by the people who'd helped me fight back, and I felt exhausted and exhilarated and heartbroken all at once. Do you think they'll take the deal? I asked Margaret. They'd be idiots not to, but people do stupid things when they're desperate and cornered. We'll know in a few hours. Those few hours were the longest of my life. I went home, my real home that I'd almost lost, and I waited. I made myself tea and couldn't drink it. I tried to paint and couldn't focus. I just sat in my living room, in the house Robert and I had built our life in, and waited to see if my children would choose redemption or ruin. At 4:45, 15 minutes before the deadline, Margaret called. They took the deal. They're at my office now with their own attorney, signing everything. You won, Dorothy. It's over. It's over. 2 words that should have brought relief, maybe even joy. Instead, I just felt hollow. But it wasn't quite over, not yet. There was one more thing I needed to do. The next day, every transfer was reversed. $42,000 appeared back in my account, transferred from Michael and Patty's accounts. Additional payments came through for the value of the items they'd sold that couldn't be recovered. They signed the affidavits admitting to financial exploitation and fraud. They signed away any inheritance rights. They agreed to the no-contact order. And then I did something they probably didn't expect. I wrote them each a letter. I didn't excuse what they'd done. I didn't forgive them, because forgiveness isn't something you can force, and I wasn't there yet, might never be there. But I told them that I hoped they'd use this as an opportunity to become better people. I told them that I'd loved them their entire lives, and some part of me always would, even though I could never trust them again. I told them that if they ever did the work to understand why they'd done what they'd done, if they ever genuinely changed, my door might someday be open. But until then, they were not welcome in my life. I sent the letters, and then I changed my locks. I changed my phone number. I told my neighbors and my church community a carefully edited version of what had happened, enough that they'd understand why Michael and Patty weren't around anymore, enough that they'd be alert if my children tried to approach me. And then I started the hard work of rebuilding my life. Not the life I'd had before, because that life had been built on illusions of family loyalty that didn't exist. A new life, built on truth and independence and my own strength. It wasn't easy. Some days I'd find myself reaching for the phone to call Michael about something before remembering I couldn't, shouldn't, wouldn't. Some days I'd see something Patty would have liked and feel a stab of loss before remembering what she'd done. Some days I'd wonder if I'd been too harsh, if I should have tried harder to salvage the relationship. But then I'd remember the bitter taste of my coffee when they were drugging me. I'd remember the confusion and fear of thinking I was losing my mind. I'd remember how easily they'd lied to my face, how completely they'd been willing to destroy me for money. And I'd know I'd made the right choice. The months after the confrontation were a strange mix of liberation and loneliness. I'd won. I'd saved myself. I'd protected everything Robert and I had built together. But the cost was the loss of the family I'd thought I had, and some days that cost felt almost too high to bear. The community reaction was mixed. Some people, the ones who knew me well, were supportive and outraged on my behalf. My friend Barbara from church organized a meal train, even though I didn't need it, just to show she cared. My neighbor Tom started checking in on me daily, making sure I was okay. The widows' support group I'd been attending rallied around me in ways that made me cry with gratitude. But there were others who whispered, who wondered if maybe I had been confused, if maybe I'd blown things out of proportion, if maybe I'd been too harsh on my poor children who'd only been trying to help. Small towns are like that sometimes. People want to believe the best of the families they've known for years. And admitting that Michael and Patty Henderson had tried to rob their own mother means admitting that anyone's children could do the same. I learned to hold my head high anyway. I learned that I didn't need everyone to believe me or support me. I had the truth, I had the legal documentation, and I had my freedom. That was enough. Jennifer, Michael's wife, reached out to me once, about a month after everything fell apart. She came to my door with my grandson Tyler, now 4 years old, and tears in her eyes. "I didn't know," she said. "I swear to you, Dorothy, I didn't know what Michael was planning. I knew things were tight financially, I knew he was stressed, but I never imagined he'd do something like this to you." I looked at her, trying to determine if she was telling the truth. I wanted to believe her. Tyler was pulling on her hand, asking to come inside, asking where Grandma's cookies were, like I always had cookies when he visited. "I believe you," I said finally. Because whether it was true or not, I wanted to give her the benefit of the doubt. "But Jennifer, I can't have Michael in my life anymore. I just can't. And I know that makes things difficult for you." "I know," she said quietly. "I'm not asking you to forgive him. I don't know if I can forgive him. But Tyler loves you, and the baby," she put a hand on her pregnant belly, "they deserve to know their grandmother, if you're willing." It was a difficult decision. Seeing Tyler meant potentially having some contact with Michael, even if indirect. It meant opening myself up to potential manipulation or guilt trips. It meant vulnerability. But it also meant not punishing an innocent child for his father's sins. It meant maintaining a connection to the next generation, to the good parts of family that had nothing to do with money or greed. "Supervised visits only," I said. "You bring Tyler here, just you and him. No Michael, ever. If I find out Michael is using you or Tyler to get information about me or my finances, it stops immediately. Can you agree to that?" She nodded, relief evident on her face. "Yes, absolutely. Thank you." So Tyler became a regular visitor again, once a week on Saturday mornings. We'd bake cookies, play in the yard, read books. He was too young to understand why Grandpa was gone or why we didn't see his daddy anymore. Jennifer told him that Grandpa had gone to heaven, which was true, and that Daddy was working a lot, which was vague enough to avoid difficult questions. When Jennifer had her second baby, a girl they named Sarah, I went to the hospital to meet her. Michael wasn't there, had apparently made himself scarce so I could visit. I held my new granddaughter and felt the complicated tangle of joy and grief that had become my constant companion. Joy for this new life, grief for the family that should have been celebrating together but couldn't. Craig, Patty's husband, never reached out. I heard through the grapevine that he and Patty had separated, that the stress of everything that had happened, combined with their financial problems, had been too much for their marriage. I felt sorry for Emma and Noah, my other grandchildren, caught in the middle of their parents' disaster. But Patty had made her choices, and I had to protect myself. I threw myself into other things to fill the void. I volunteered more at the food bank, eventually becoming a coordinator for their senior services program. I took more art classes, discovering I had a real talent for watercolor landscapes. I started a small business selling my paintings at local craft fairs, nothing that would make me rich, but enough to give me purpose and connection. I traveled, something Robert and I had always planned to do more of, but never quite got around to. I took a cruise to Alaska, spent 2 weeks in Arizona with my sister, flew to New York City and saw Broadway shows and visited museums until my feet ached. I discovered that I liked traveling alone, liked the freedom to set my own schedule, to eat when and where I wanted, to spend an entire afternoon in a gallery if something caught my interest. I dated, which felt strange and terrifying at first. A man named Frank from the Widows Support Group asked me to dinner, and I almost said no, but then I thought, why not? I was 69 years old, but I wasn't dead. I was allowed to want companionship, allowed to enjoy male attention, allowed to explore what life might look like with someone new. Frank and I didn't work out romantically, but we became good friends. He introduced me to other people, widows and widowers navigating the same strange territory of starting over later in life. I built a new social circle, people who knew me as Dorothy, independent woman and survivor, not Dorothy, the poor mother whose children tried to steal from her. About a year after the confrontation, Margaret called me with news. Dr. Patterson and Dr. Morrison are both under investigation by the Missouri State Board of Medical Examiners. Apparently, your case wasn't the only one where they'd cooperated to provide questionable diagnoses and prescriptions. The board is looking into revoking their licenses. Good, I said, and meant it. If my fight could protect other vulnerable people from what had been done to me, then it was worth every painful moment. There's something else, Margaret said. Michael declared bankruptcy. His business failed completely, and with the money he had to pay back to you plus legal fees, he lost everything. He and Jennifer are living in a rental apartment. Patty's real estate license is under review because of the ethical violations involved in selling your property without proper authorization. She might lose it. I should have felt triumphant. These were the consequences I'd wanted, the justice I'd sought. But mostly, I just felt sad. Sad for the waste of it all, for the people my children could have been if they'd made different choices. How do you feel about that? Margaret asked. I feel like I wish it had never had to happen, I said honestly. I wish they'd just loved me enough not to betray me. But since they made their choices, I can't regret that there were consequences. Life settled into a new normal. I woke up each day in my own house, managing my own affairs, making my own decisions. I took my real medications, the ones I actually needed for blood pressure and cholesterol, from doctors I trusted. My mind stayed sharp and clear. I proved, day after day, that I was exactly as competent as I'd always known I was. I kept a copy of Dr. Rodriguez's medical evaluation in my safe deposit box, along with all the other documentation of what had happened, just in case, just to remind myself that I wasn't crazy, wasn't confused, wasn't the problem. They were. 2 years after the confrontation, on a bright spring morning, I was working in my garden when a car pulled up. My heart jumped, old fear rising before I could control it. But it wasn't Michael or Patty. It was Emma, Patty's daughter, now 16 years old. She got out of the car slowly, nervously, and walked up my driveway. "Hi, Grandma," she said quietly. I stood up, brushing dirt from my gardening gloves. "Emma, does your mother know you're here?" "No, I drove myself. I got my license last month." She took a breath. "I know what Mom and Uncle Michael did to you. I figured it out, pieced it together from things I overheard and things that didn't add up.
I'm so sorry. I'm sorry I didn't know sooner. I'm sorry I couldn't stop it. I'm sorry. I looked at this young woman, so much like Patty had been at that age, and felt my heart crack open just a little. It wasn't your responsibility to stop it, Emma. You were a child. This was never your fault. I know, but I
wanted you to know that I don't think it was okay what they did. I told Mom I thought it was horrible. We had a huge fight about it. She tried to say you were confused, that you misunderstood, but I knew she was lying. I could tell. That must have been hard for you. Emma nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. I miss you. I miss coming over here. I miss baking with you. I miss just talking to you. Is there any way, I know I don't have any right to ask, but is there any way I could still see you sometimes, without Mom? I'll be going to college next year. I'll be on my own. And I don't want to lose you two. I walked over to her and pulled her into a hug. She was taller than me now, had been for a while, but she still buried her face in my shoulder like she had when she was small. You can see me anytime you want, I said. You're always welcome here, Emma. Always. You are not your mother's mistakes. You're your own person, and I love you. She stayed for hours that day. We talked about school, her plans for college, her boyfriend, her worries about her brother Noah, who was struggling with the family drama. We baked cookies like we used to. We looked through old photo albums. We built a bridge back to each other. And slowly, piece by piece, I built a new version of family. Not the one I thought I had, not the picture-perfect image I'd carried in my head for so long, but a real one, built on honesty and boundaries and mutual respect. Tyler and Sarah through Jennifer. Emma and eventually Noah too when he was ready. My sister and her kids, my friends from church and the food bank and art class. Family, I learned, isn't just blood. It's the people who show up for you, who protect you instead of preying on you, who want you to thrive, not just survive, who value you for who you are, not what you have. I was 70 years old, living alone in the house I'd nearly lost, doing exactly what I wanted with my life and my money. I was painting, traveling, volunteering, spending time with the grandchildren who wanted to know me. I was free. And that freedom, hard-won and fiercely protected, was worth everything it had cost me. Now, before I finish this story, I want to ask something of you. If you've made it this far, if you've listened to my entire journey from betrayal to survival to triumph, you're part of a special group. You're someone who values these real stories, who understands that these things actually happen to real women, real families. I need you to hit that like button if you haven't already, because that simple action helps YouTube share this story with other women who might be going through the same thing right now. Subscribe to this channel if you want to hear more real stories of survival and resilience. And please drop a comment telling me what you thought, or what country you're watching from, or even just a word of encouragement. Every single comment, every like, every subscription helps us build a community of women supporting women. It helps us spread awareness about elder abuse and financial exploitation. It helps us reach the people who need these stories most. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being here and for helping these important stories reach the people who need them. Now, let me tell you what I've learned from all of this and what I hope you'll take away if you're facing anything similar. First, I learned that trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is wrong. I ignored my gut feelings for too long because I couldn't imagine my own children would hurt me. But our instincts exist for a reason. They pick up on things our conscious mind doesn't want to acknowledge. If you feel like something is off, investigate, ask questions. Don't let anyone convince you that your concerns are just confusion or paranoia. Second, I learned that you are never too old to fight back. I was 66 years old when this started, nearly 68 by the time I found the strength to really fight. I'd spent my whole life being taught to be nice, to keep the peace, to put family first. Unlearning those lessons was hard, maybe the hardest thing I've ever done, but I'm so glad I did it. Age doesn't make you weak. Experience, wisdom, determination, those things only get stronger with time. Don't let anyone use your age as a weapon against you. Third, I learned that documentation is everything. The notebook I kept, the bank statements I printed, the medical records I obtained, all of that evidence was crucial to stopping what was happening to me. If you suspect financial abuse or any kind of exploitation, document everything. Dates, times, conversations, transactions, everything. Take photos, make copies, keep records in a safe place where the abusers can't access them. Evidence turns he said, she said into provable facts. Fourth, I learned that you can't do this alone. I tried to handle it by myself at first, and I was drowning. Margaret Sullivan, Dr. Rodriguez, Detective Warren, the friends who supported me, they were all essential to my survival. There are people who specialize in helping with exactly these situations: elder law attorneys, adult protective services, police financial crimes units, organizations dedicated to preventing elder abuse. Reach out. Ask for help. You don't have to fight alone, and you shouldn't. Fifth, I learned that family isn't always who you think it is. This is the hardest lesson, the most painful one. I had to accept that my children were not who I believed them to be, that the family I'd built my entire life around was based on false assumptions. But I also learned that family can be redefined. Jennifer showed me kindness when she didn't have to. Emma chose our relationship over blind loyalty to her mother. My friends became my chosen family. Blood doesn't automatically make someone family, and lack of blood doesn't mean someone can't be. Sixth, I learned that money changes people, reveals them. My children showed me who they really were when they thought I was vulnerable and they could benefit from it. That's a painful truth, but it's also a valuable one. When someone shows you who they are, believe them. Don't make excuses. Don't rationalize. Don't convince yourself that they don't really mean it or they'll change. People might change, but you can't count on it, and you can't sacrifice yourself hoping for it. Seventh, I learned that boundaries are not cruel, they're necessary. I had to cut my children out of my life to protect myself, and some people thought that was harsh. But boundaries aren't about punishment, they're about safety. They're about protecting yourself from people who have proven they'll hurt you. Setting boundaries, enforcing consequences, demanding respect, none of that makes you a bad person. It makes you a person who values herself enough to require others to value her too. Eighth, I learned that surviving isn't enough. You have to rebuild. You have to create a life that's worth living, not just existence, but actual joy and purpose and connection. I could have won my legal battle and then just sat in my house, bitter and isolated, focused on what I'd lost. Instead, I chose to focus on what I still had and what I could create. I chose travel and art and new friendships. I chose to keep living, really living, with intention and hope. Ninth, I learned that forgiveness is optional. Our culture, especially for women, especially for mothers, puts enormous pressure on us to forgive, to let go, to move on, to preserve family harmony at all costs. But forgiveness isn't something you owe anyone, especially not people who haven't earned it through genuine remorse and changed behavior. Michael and Patty have never truly apologized, never really acknowledged the full scope of what they did. I don't forgive them. Maybe someday I will, maybe I won't. But either way, it's my choice, not an obligation. And finally, I learned that it's never too late to start over. I'm 70 years old now, and this is in many ways the best period of my life. Not because it's been easy, it hasn't, but because it's authentic. I'm living on my own terms, making my own choices, surrounding myself with people who actually care about me. I thought my life was over when Robert died. I thought it was definitely over when I discovered what my children were doing. But I was wrong. Life isn't over until you decide it's over, and I have too much left to do to give up. If you're watching this and you're going through something similar, please hear me. You are not alone. You are not crazy. You are not wrong to feel hurt and betrayed. What's happening to you is not okay, and you don't deserve it. You are worth fighting for. Your safety, your assets, your dignity, your peace of mind, all of it is worth protecting. Reach out for help. Contact an elder law attorney. Call Adult Protective Services. Talk to your doctor, your real doctor, who isn't connected to the people hurting you. Tell someone you trust. Document everything. And most importantly, don't give up on yourself. The people who are supposed to love us sometimes turn out to be the most dangerous people in our lives. That's a horrible truth, but it's one we have to face. And when we face it, when we fight back, when we protect ourselves and demand justice, we discover strength we never knew we had. I never thought I'd be the kind of woman who'd take her own children to court. I never imagined I'd be 70 years old, living alone, estranged from most of my family. This isn't the life I planned or the life I wanted. But it's the life I have, and I've made it into something good, something true, something mine. My name is Dorothy Henderson. I'm 70 years old. I live in Springfield, Missouri, in the house I almost lost, managing the assets I fought to protect. I paint watercolors, I volunteer at the food bank, I travel when I feel like it, and I spend time with the people who genuinely love me. My children tried to steal my money and my freedom. They tried to convince me I was losing my mind. They tried to lock me away and take everything I'd worked for. They failed, and I'm still here, stronger than ever, living proof that it's never too late to fight back, to stand up for yourself, to demand the life and the respect you deserve. If I can do it at 68, you can do it too. Whatever your age, whatever your situation, you have the power to protect yourself. You have the right to live free from exploitation and abuse. You have the strength to survive and thrive, even when the people who should protect you are the ones you need protection from. Don't give up. Don't give in. Fight for yourself with everything you have. You're worth it. And remember, it's never too late to start living on your own terms. Never too late to find joy. Never too late to be free. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for being part of this community. And if my story helps even one person recognize what's happening to them and find the courage to fight back, then every painful moment was worth it. Take care of yourselves, protect yourselves, and remember, you're stronger than you know.